bit of like prejudice against American culture, partly because Canada has been very much sidelined, I guess. I mean, we often get mistaken for Americans when we're traveling. And then on top of it, like every time a business in Canada seems to be doing well, it seems like it gets bought up by a US corporation and then just they run with it, sort of. So we're kind of like, I don't know, inferiority complex or something. So, so that the stereotypes about loud Americans or whatever is a factor in Canada, which I so and also my parents used to say, "Oh, that's so American," or something like when we would see films where it's really obviously a kind of a rah rah hero worship type action film. That was something we associated with American culture. Anyway, I'm going into this too much. Consequently, I had not taken much interest in American politics, but I had noticed that lately I've been commenting a lot on YouTube because there was a candidate running who took my fancy or has been interesting to watch. And because I've never seen a candidate like this in politics anywhere. And that is Marianne Williamson. Now, one of the things that I wanted to say about Trump is that I don't think there's a lot of speculation about why he won. Obviously, there's the electoral college thing, and then they've been doing this whole Russiagate thing, trying to investigate him for Russian interference in the elections. I understand that, and it is kind of a concern, but I think that they're horribly sidetracked. And I also think that you're not taking into account that people don't necessarily think that deeply. Like the average person, there are people who are political commentators and people who are very engaged in politics, but I think that the average American citizen, even Canadian citizen, they pretty much they vote for the person that they get a good feel off. And the thing about Trump, or actually not even necessarily, it doesn't even have to be someone that they like. It can be someone that they remember. Because the thing is that I think that a person is more likely to vote for someone that they don't particularly like than someone that they get no feeling off whatsoever. And the thing is that people in America have been, and Canada and around the world, have been watching reality TV for quite a few years now. The Apprentice was very much played. And I think that people, in spite of disliking Trump, got a lot of delight out of seeing this orange-faced, fast food mascot-looking man say to people, "You're fired." And they found it funny. And they would, I think actually there was a part of people who were fed up with politics and all this kind of like condescending way that politicians speak. I think they like the fantasy of someone sitting in the White House and saying, "You're fired." Honestly, I think that was a big factor in why he got elected, especially for people that were frustrated with the system that was already in place. So when he declared to run, I think that it caught people's fancy in that way. I also think that you have to take into account the fact that, and I'm not saying this to be insulting to voters as if they're stupid, but the thing is that we, and this is true of me also, we subject ourselves to media pretty much from dusk till dawn. I mean, like if you're not doing a job or you're not working, you're probably watching TV or playing on your phone, and that means that a lot of your time is spent absorbing what other people are telling you, and not necessarily taking much time to reflect on that. Like people like to think that they have automatic objectivity, that it's just something that you're born with, or that intelligence is like objective critical thinking is something that's just innate if you just slap yourself into it or something. But actually, it's something that has to be cultivated, it and one of the ways I would say that you do cultivate it is by reading, and the other is by meditating or just reflecting. Spending a half hour sitting on the toilet staring off into space can be hugely beneficial just for going into an objective state of mind. And if you're always engaged with some kind of sensory stimulus, I think that you become very, very susceptible to the power of suggestion. So you also have to realize that not only is mind control possible by corporations and politicians, but they're betting money on your gullibility, because McDonald's, Walmart, all these companies, their success has actually ridden on the fact not that you should like their product, but that they just want you to hear the name Walmart. Like, it's just, they spend billions of dollars just to get that subliminal message. Like, I think I heard something that started actually in the 70s, where it wasn't even a commercial, but they would just flash a screen that you can barely perceive on the television in between, and to you it just looks like a blip, but actually it's like a logo or something, and it goes into your subconscious. And I don't know if that is true or if it works, but to me that would indicate to you how powerful they think that just getting you to notice their product is. And I think that's kind of how Trump also won, in a way, because his face was everywhere, and it's a very unforgettable face with that hair and that color, and his communication style. So, anyway, so in that sense, I don't think that a candidate like Joe Biden has any sort of chance, because I don't think that he's memorable at all. I think he looks like every other politician who's ever been, and I don't think that. I think that once upon a time, if he was running against other guys like him, then he could win, because then those would be the only choices. And I think now people are so upset with Trump that they want to go back, but I don't think you can now. I think now that Trump has stolen the limelight, we have to go for a better version of the entertaining candidate. I know that sounds like we prostituted ourselves, but I think you can. You can't just kind of go back to normalcy now, because I think that the absurdity is fully rocking, and I think we should just try to steer it into a good direction. And there are many candidates who are more progressive, perhaps, than Marianne Williamson. Bernie Sanders is a legend, and he has been campaigning for progressive things and issues for upwards of 30 years, I would say, and he's a very impressive record, and he's a senator. And Elizabeth Warren also has a very good record. She has put through a lot of bills that have done a lot of good things for people in education and healthcare, and she's a spitfire in the Senate. But is the role of the senator the same as the role of the president? I don't think it is. I think that the role of the president has more of a wow factor. It's more like a celebrity. It's more someone who can speak to inspire people. And it's also the role, most importantly, I think, it is the role of a diplomat, because they're going to meet with other world leaders and hopefully not offend them. I mean, seeing Trump pat the Queen of England on the back like she was his granny was quite cringeworthy. A little funny also, but anyway, so why do I like Marianne Williamson? Look, I don't expect everyone to see her the way that I do necessarily, but as someone who was never that inspired about American culture, when she spoke, she made me see it in a way that I had never seen it before, about how America was founded on the idea of liberty, which wasn't really a thing before that so much. I mean, in France, yes. But okay, so even if it's not like the first time that idea had come about, but it is a beautiful thing. And it is a beautiful thing that they tried to create a declaration of independence and the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness for all men, all people. That is a beautiful thing. And the fact that half the people signing up were slave owners, uh, well, she talks about that, and that's actually one of the reasons that I like her. Anyway, I also like the fact that she does not fit the stereotype of a spiritual, inspirational teacher. I don't find her floaty. I mean, there was this whole, not smear campaign exactly, but there was this whole breakdown of the candidates, and these guys were saying that she wants to hug everyone, which I thought was, I think that they did not actually know anything about her. And I was kind of pissed when when I was listening to that, because it's so not actually what she is about. I actually would hesitate to hug her. I think she's kind of hard as nails and a little scary. When she talks about love, she's talking about that in a very philosophical way. She's talking about the idea of human kindness, not just like, let's have a circle and hold hands. Like, whatever your stereotype is about New Age people, I think that is really not what impressed me. Was that she kind of blew that out of the water. And so that was another thing that I liked about her. I also was not on board with the idea of reparations. I have no stake in this. I'm Canadian, but I have opinions about everything. So Sonny Hostin had asked Bernie Sanders on The View if he was in favor of reparations, and he said, "What do you mean by reparations?" And she said, basically money. And he said that he didn't think that writing a check was a way to address that. And I thought he was right at the time, because it is such a grievous injury, slavery, and money seems insulting. And also, I couldn't imagine how you would logistically come up with a plan for reparations. And I also felt like I'm not responsible for everything that my ancestors do. I'm a person that believes in reincarnation. So, like, does that mean that I could have been maybe black in my last life? So I was thinking like that. Like, maybe I'm more related to my past life than my ancestors. Kind of like that. Anyway, so I kind of agreed with him. And then I heard Marianne Williamson speak about it, and she was talking about, first of all, I never knew that Germany had paid reparations to Jewish organizations after the Second World War. And I also didn't know about the 40 acres and a mule that had been promised to black people after people who had been slaves, former slaves, and then they were liberated after abolition. I didn't realize that they had been promised 40 acres and a mule, which actually would have been a big start. Like, if you think of where that would bring them now, to have land, and also they already had a skill set to work that land in the South. Anyway, they were in many cases not given, or it was given and then rescinded. And then in the South, after the Union, I guess, left, then the legislators in the South passed what were called Black Code laws, which I had never heard of this, but apparently it was basically this sort of institutionalized racism that prevented black people from getting good jobs, or especially any roles in power, politics or anything like that. And also, well, lynchings for years until civil rights. So, and then when you look at, and then she's kind of points out, like, and then you look at the fact that there's mass incarceration of black people who are incarcerated for a much longer period than white people who committed the same crime, many of them nonviolent. She illustrates very well how the whole system is actually racist, and it's not like suddenly I kind of understood what privilege is, in the way that, like, I can be privileged as a white person and not even know it, and I'm taking things for granted that I'm not even thinking about, which is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. And then also just the income inequality, which is actually systematic. So I was just discussing with someone on YouTube who was questioning the whole reparations thing. He thinks it's very funny. He's a right-winger anyway. He's like, well, how would you do it? And, how is it even possible? And what are they going to do? Are they going to do like genetic testing? And I was trying to make the point, I hope I was able to, that it's not about the descendants of slave owners paying back money directly to the descendants of slaves as a karmic debt. It is a karmic debt, but actually what Marianne Williams is trying to institute is to address the systematic racism that's in place in the institutions by the government creating a social program to address that. And so, like, she would set up a council of black intellectuals and like social science experts and education experts and historians, and they would be responsible for distributing the money over time to special organizations that would be educational and economic, like job creation type things. I'm not an economist, and it shows when I talk, but anyway. $200 billion, I think she said, over the period of 2 years. And she said, look, this cannot erase the history of slavery, but she does point to the fact that when you go to Germany, it's a very different feeling, like, than in America, for instance. Like, the distinction, the kind of gulf between black people and white people in America is greater than the gulf between Jewish people and whatever Teutonic Germans. In terms of just the feeling and the way they interact, and the prejudice is a lot less anyway. So, which, maybe that won't work again, but she definitely feels that it's worth addressing, and she's prepared to deal with, like, there's obviously problems that are going to come, because one of the discussions that's already underway about reparations is black people who are the descendants of slaves do not want people who have just come from Nigeria and immigrated to the U.S. to receive the same benefits that they would under reparations, and obviously not. But obviously there's potential for some people to misuse the system, and then also there's the question of how much percentage of blackness do you need to receive benefits. And this was something that this guy was raising with me, the right-winger on YouTube, and I don't know how they would deal with that, but Marianne Williamson's answer to that is that the council is going to decide this stuff. I, as the white president, do not necessarily have the right to tell you how to spend money that I owe you. Which was a nice way to put it. But then she is stipulating that this money is going to be used for education and economic opportunity, not just kind of willy-nilly. Anyway. So, what else do I like about her? She's a really good speaker, and she hates sound bites, but she has some good ones. Because, like, I think her team had said to her, how are you going to boil it down? And she was like, I don't want to boil it down. I want people to get deep with me. I want them to hear the whole conversation, which is a very good point. But I think that in spite of that, she has come up with some sound bites that are very memorable. I mean, she says things like, you know, we don't need someone in Washington who knows how Washington works. We need someone in Washington who knows how a sociopath works, which she's a kind of therapist, so she's suggesting that she does know that. I do think she knows that better than Elizabeth Warren. And I kind of think that she has a point, even though like a lot of people feel that Trump is a bad president because he had no experience. I don't think that's why he's a bad president. I think Trump is a bad president because he's Trump. Like, come on. I mean, after that dispute between him and Rosie O'Donnell, it was like I felt like he showed his true colors back then. Anyway, so yeah, she is my favorite candidate. And so I wanted to talk about the difference between her and Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard is also an amazing candidate, as a former veteran who wants to advocate for peace, basically waging peace and discontinuing regime change wars. She's a very interesting candidate, and I think it's a lovely platform to run on. And also the fact that she's really sticking to that shows that she means to get that done, because I think that a lot of presidential candidates try to make a lot of different, they try to address so many issues and then they end up not really doing any of them because it's too much to do. And I also don't know if a president could really do anything, honestly. Now, Tulsi Gabbard is a beautiful person, and she speaks kind of well. Like, she's very articulate. I don't feel, if we're following Trump and then you're looking for a candidate, which I personally am, because I think it's an important factor in order to get votes. I think that so far, the only candidate, actually, I think I can say with reasonable authority, who has the wow factor to outshine the amazing orange talking cheese doodle, who's currently in office, is in fact Marianne Williamson, because she has the ability to play to a crowd and inspire people and appeal to their sense of national pride. I feel like the other candidates are being very reasonable, which appeals to political analysts, and the media kind of likes them because they sound reasonable and grown up. And actually, Marianne Williamson also does. She also sounds reasonable and grown up and very well informed and woke, but she also, there's this undercurrent sucker punch of emotional wow factor, which I feel is necessary actually to win the presidency. Anyway, a lot of people disagree with me. They think that it's important to be good on the issues and you should have experience in politics. I think they're being too grown up about it at this point, because that's, I don't know. I don't think boring candidates, and I'm not saying that Bernie Sanders is boring or that Elizabeth Warren is boring. Actually, I will say that I do think she's boring. She sounds like a first grade math teacher. She sounds like she's like, I feel like I'm getting lectured about algebra or something, or my times tables when she's talking. I don't think it's appealing. I think that, like, I looked at her policies and they're all great, and she's very good in the Senate, but when she talks in interviews and she's explaining stuff, I don't know, it grates on me. It's unfair maybe, but the only other candidate, I mean, there are two candidates who are hot, which is Cory Booker and Julian Castro, who are gorgeous guys, and they're kind of appealing when they talk. Booker has an amazing ability to connect with the audience in an emotional way, which progressives are not giving him credit for, but I actually think he does it really well. But they're not getting amazing traction. Julian Castro has a great smile. I think he would have won in the 60s or the 50s. Um, if they could get over in those days, it was very much more racially. There was definitely more of a racial glass ceiling than there is now, I think. Um, the candidate who makes me laugh is Amy Klobuchar, because I think she's really super freaky. I think she is a nut bar. And the hilarious thing is that she's a centrist, but she's so out there that I feel like she should be progressive, because she's like bonkers. Like the fact that she ate her salad with a comb to make a point to her staff, I just think that's legendary, actually, and not a reason to vote her in as president, but I feel like she's very entertaining in politics. And of course, actually the most progressive candidate and the best probably candidate, who is not even running to be president, he's running just to get his message across, is Mike Gravel, and arguably way more progressive than Tulsi Gabbard or Marianne Williamson. But I would put Marianne Williamson and Tulsi Gabbard at the top in terms of progressive platforms. I'm giving Marianne Williamson slightly an edge over the other candidates because of the fact that she is for reparations, which I think is a progressive issue. And I feel like Tulsi Gabbard is much more unequivocal about waging peace, which I consider to be more progressive than the issue of healthcare, although I think healthcare is very essential, but I also don't think it's that progressive right now. I think it's become mainstream in this election. I think most of the candidates have adopted it. So I don't think it's enough to call yourself progressive anymore just to be for universal health care, although critics of Marianne Williamson have said that she's not unequivocal enough because she's allowing for a public option. And she doesn't get why she's allowing for it to, I don't understand how it works, but basically she's allowing people to keep their private health insurance and also opt for the public option. And I think that Bernie Sanders' kind of school of thought is to just have one system of healthcare which is covered by the government, so it's free healthcare basically, which is being paid for by taxes, obviously. Anyway, I think I have talked about everything, and I've run out of things to say. I thought I was going to be very impassioned, but I basically just rambled. I like Marianne Williamson. I like the way she talks. I think she's a cool chick. I don't think I'd like her as a person. I don't think that I would like to hang out with her, actually. But I would love to see her, if not as president, although I think she is, in fact, probably the most qualified to outshine Trump in a debate. I've also seen her argue against conservatives, and she comes off quite well. But if she can't get that far, then at least I would like her to promote this message, because I noticed that every time, like last time there was an election, the Green Party lady. I'm forgetting too many names in my head, but Jill Stein. She was considered sort of laughable candidate, and she had no traction. But now her message is the mainstream message for this term for the Democratic Party, pretty much. So, like, if you're not in on the Green New Deal and healthcare for everyone, you're nowhere, pretty much. So that's my take on politics, and I would recommend, if you have not seen any, I'm not saying you have to like Marianne Williamson, maybe she's not your thing, but I think that you should definitely, like, if you've never heard of her, you need to, because otherwise you're not really relevant. I'm sorry to say that, but I think that, have any opinion you like about her, but if you want to be progressive, you need to know who Mike Gravel is, you need to know who Tulsi Gabbard is, and you need to know who Marianne Williamson is, if you know anyone. You do not need to look at Buttigieg. You do not need to look at Joe Biden. And Cory Booker Julian Castro. I mean, they're nice eye candy. Um, Pretty much everyone else is not doing anything very important. Sorry, but the front runners are pretty irrelevant. What they're calling the front runners on CNN, which I think is manufactured, is they have nothing to say. And that's my opinion on the topic. And I really have to do some pagan videos because this is getting boring when I'm talking politics. I never thought I'd be doing this. Anyway, okay, so I'm gonna go upload this, and yes, check out Marianne Williamson and see what you think. And that's all I have to say about it. Okay, bye for now.